The first time Dr. Alden Reyes knocked on our door at exactly 2 in the morning, I thought someone had died. That's the only reason a small-town doctor comes to your porch in the dead hours, at least in Bracken Hollow, where the population sign has read 482 since I was in middle school. I remember the sound of his knuckles on the wood because it wasn't frantic. It was measured. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more, like he was counting something inside his own head before he let himself be heard. My name is June Whitaker. I was 29 years old that autumn, back in my mother's house after the divorce, sleeping in the same bedroom where I used to hide comic books under the mattress. I mention my age because it matters later, when the doctor started deciding who was worth saving and who wasn't. And the number on your license became a kind of currency you didn't know you were spending. My mother reached the door before I did. Her name was Elena, and she had known Alden Reyes for 31 years. He'd delivered me. He'd set my brother Micah's arm when Micah fell off the water tower on a dare. He'd sat with my father through the last 6 weeks of the cancer and never once billed us for the extra visits. So when she opened the door and saw him standing there in his gray coat with his black bag at his side, she didn't ask what was wrong. She just stepped back to let him in. He didn't come in. He stayed on the porch, and the porch light made the rain on his shoulders look like small pieces of broken glass. He looked at my mother, and then passed her at me on the stairs. And he said 5 words in a voice so flat it took me a second to understand they were words at all. Lock every door by dawn. Then he turned and walked back down the steps to his old station wagon, and the wagon's headlights cut a slow arc across the front yard, and he was gone before my mother could ask him what he meant. She stood there in the doorway with her hand still on the knob. I came down the last 3 stairs and stood beside her. The rain kept falling. Somewhere out on Route 9, a dog was barking in a way I'd never heard a dog bark before, high and steady, like it had forgotten how to stop. "He's tired," my mother said finally. "He's been at the Kessler place all week. Old Kessler's been sick." She said it the way people say things when they need the sentence to be true, more than they need it to be accurate. I didn't argue. I locked the door. I checked the back door too, and the window over the kitchen sink that never quite sat right in its frame. And then I went upstairs, and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling until the gray started leaking in around the curtain rod. I told myself I was awake because the coffee at dinner had been too strong. I told myself Alden Reyes was 64 years old and worked 80-hour weeks, and sometimes tired people said strange things at strange hours. At 6:15, my phone buzzed. It was my friend Wren from across town, who worked the overnight at the Sunoco. Her message said, "Did the doctor come to your house last night?" I stared at it. I typed back, "Yes, you too." 3 dots, a long pause. Then, "He's been to every house on Miller Street, every single one. Same time, same words." I sat up. The rain had stopped. Outside, the birds should have started, but they hadn't. The sky was that pale, drained color that isn't quite morning yet. And somewhere down the block, I heard the sound of another door being locked from the inside. And then another. And then another. As if the whole town were slowly holding its breath. By 8, I was dressed and walking toward the diner on Cedar Street, which was where Wren said everyone was gathering, without exactly meaning to. That's how it works in a place like Bracken Hollow. Nobody calls a meeting. People just start ending up in the same room. And then somebody puts on coffee. And then somebody else says the thing that everyone has been afraid to say. And by then, it's already a meeting whether you wanted one or not. The diner was called Marla's, and Marla herself was behind the counter when I came in, her hair up in the same red bandana she'd worn since I was in high school. She saw me and didn't smile. That was the first thing that was wrong. Marla always smiled. She smiled at people she hated. She smiled at the tax assessor. But this morning, her mouth was a straight line, and her hands were doing that small, nervous thing where she wiped the same square of countertop over and over. Wren was in the corner booth with two men I recognized, but didn't really know. One was Boyd Halloran, the volunteer fire chief, a broad man in his 50s with a beard going white at the edges. The other was a younger guy, maybe my age, in a green flannel shirt. Wren introduced him as Theo Marsh, a wildlife biologist who'd been renting the old Denning cabin out past the tree line for the summer, studying something about the deer population. He had that quiet way of sitting that outdoors people have, where they take up less space than their body should. "Every house," Boyd was saying when I slid in. "I've talked to 22 people this morning. He hit every one of them. Same time, same words." "Did he go to the Kesslers?" Wren asked. Boyd shook his head. "Nobody's seen the Kesslers in 4 days." The waitress brought me coffee I hadn't ordered. I wrapped my hands around it because they had started to shake, and I didn't want anyone to see. Theo Marsh noticed anyway. He didn't say anything. He just slid the sugar closer to me, which was such a small, human thing that I almost cried. And I hadn't cried in 6 months. Not since the day I signed the papers. "Where is he now?" I asked. "The clinic's locked," Boyd said. "His car isn't there. His house is dark." "Did anyone call the sheriff?" Boyd's jaw worked. "Sheriff Doone hasn't answered his radio since about 4 this morning." That was when the diner went quiet in a particular way. The way a room goes quiet when everyone realizes at the same second that the shape of the day is not going to be the shape they'd planned. Marla stopped wiping the counter. The old man at the far booth, whose name I didn't know but who'd been eating the same egg and toast breakfast every morning of my life, set down his fork with a small, deliberate click. Theo spoke for the first time. His voice was low. "I've been seeing things in the woods." Everyone turned. "Deer," he said. "2 of them, 3 days ago, up near the ridge. They were moving wrong, their heads, their necks. I thought it was a neurological illness at first, something viral, maybe chronic wasting. But it wasn't that. I've been tracking a doe for 2 weeks, and yesterday I found her. And she was still moving, and she shouldn't have been." He paused. "There was a person with her, or there had been. I only saw pieces." Boyd stood up so fast the booth shook. "Why in God's name didn't you say something?" "I called the state office yesterday afternoon," Theo said quietly. "They told me to stay in my cabin and wait for someone to come. Nobody came." He looked at me and then at Wren. "And then last night, at 2 in the morning, a doctor I'd never met knocked on my door and told me to lock everything by dawn." Outside, a car horn began to sound. It didn't stop. The horn was coming from Bledsoe's Feed and Seed at the end of the block. Boyd was out the door first, and I went after him because I couldn't think of what else to do. And Theo came after me, and Wren stayed with Marla because Marla had started to cry very quietly in a way that suggested she was going to be no help to anyone until she got through the crying part. The morning air smelled wrong. That's the only way I know to say it. Bracken Hollow in October. Always smells like wet leaves and the smoke from the Perkins family's wood stove and the faint sweetness of apples going soft in orchards nobody harvested anymore. This morning, it smelled like something under all of that. Something metallic and warm. Like a copper penny held too long in a closed hand. Bledsoe's parking lot had 1 truck in it. The truck was old Ferris Bledsoe's, and it was running, and the driver's door was open. And Ferris was slumped forward with his forehead pressed against the horn and his hand hanging out the window. From 20 feet away, I could see the dark stains spreading down the front of his coveralls. Boyd got there first and pulled him back off the horn, and the horn stopped, and in the silence, I could hear Boyd say, "Oh, Ferris, oh, buddy, no." Then Ferris moved. It wasn't the kind of movement a wounded man makes. Wounded men move slow and toward comfort, toward the hand that's holding them, toward the voice they know. Ferris moved the way a snapping turtle moves when you get too close to its head. It was all one motion. No wind-up, no warning. And he caught Boyd by the sleeve of his jacket with both hands and pulled him in. I don't remember shouting. Theo says I did. What I remember is Theo's arm coming across my chest to stop me from running forward, and I remember Boyd getting his forearm up under Ferris's chin, and I remember the sound Ferris was making, which was not a human sound, and not an animal sound, but the sound of a throat trying to remember how to be, either. Boyd is a big man. He got Ferris off him. He shoved him back into the cab of the truck and slammed the door, and Ferris hit the inside of the window with the flat of his face. And the window didn't break, but a crack ran through it in a long white line. Boyd stumbled back. His sleeve was torn. There was blood on it. I couldn't tell whose. "Boyd," I said. He looked at his arm. He rolled the sleeve up. There was a scratch there, long and shallow, from Ferris's fingernail. Not a bite, just a scratch. He looked at me, and I looked at Theo. And Theo's face did a thing that I would come to recognize later as the face he made when he was calculating an outcome and finding it unacceptable. "We need to get him inside," Theo said. "We need to clean it." "It's a scratch," Boyd said. "We need to clean it," Theo said again, in the same voice. And Boyd nodded slowly, because sometimes a stranger telling you something calmly is easier to hear than a friend telling you the same thing loudly. Behind us, the truck rocked. Ferris was throwing himself against the inside of the door. The old metal groaned. "Doctor," I said. "We need the doctor." "The doctor," Theo said, "is why we're standing here." I turned to look at him. The morning light was on his face, and I could see for the first time how tired he was. Not the tired of a bad night's sleep, the tired of a person who had already understood something the rest of us were still refusing to. "He knew," I said. Theo nodded. "He went to every house," I said. "He told us to lock the doors. He knew." "Yes," Theo said. "And I think we need to find him before somebody else does." We put Boyd in the back of Theo's Bronco and drove to my mother's house because it was closest and because I couldn't think of anywhere else that felt like it still belonged to the world I recognized. My mother met us at the door with a look I hadn't seen on her since the day of my father's diagnosis. The look that says, "Tell me everything, and tell me now, and I will be angry about the details later." She sat Boyd at the kitchen table. She got out the peroxide and the gauze and the small brown bottle of iodine that had lived in the same drawer since I was a child. She cleaned the scratch on Boyd's forearm without asking any of the questions she wanted to ask. Her hands did not shake. That was the thing about my mother. Her hands never shook when they were doing something useful. Theo stood by the window, looking out at the road. Wren had followed us in her own car, and she was on the porch on the phone, trying to reach her brother in Millvale, 30 miles east. She kept saying his name into the phone. She kept saying it the way you say a name when the person on the other end is not answering, and you are trying to make the phone remember him for you. "Tell me," my mother said to Theo without turning around. Theo told her. He told her about the deer and the state office and the doctor at his cabin door and about Ferris in the parking lot. He kept his voice even. When he got to the part about Ferris moving, my mother's hands did pause for a moment on the gauze, but only for a moment, and then they kept going. "Elena," Boyd said. He was staring at his arm. "I'm all right, aren't I? It's just a scratch." "You're all right," my mother said. I looked at Theo. Theo did not look at me. "June," my mother said, still not turning around. "Go up to the attic and bring down your father's rifle and the ammunition in the green metal box. And the small radio, the one that runs on batteries." I went. I hadn't been in the attic in 3 years. The rifle was where my father had left it, wrapped in an old flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of his aftershave. And the green box was heavier than I remembered. The radio was on the shelf with the Christmas ornaments. When I came back down, my mother had finished with Boyd's arm and was standing at the kitchen sink washing her hands. And the water was running very hot, and steam was coming off her wrists. "Boyd," she said, "I need you to sit here and drink some water and tell me if you start to feel warm." "Elena, drink the water, Boyd." He drank the water. Theo took the radio from me. He turned the dial slowly. Static, static, static. And then a voice, very faint, a woman's voice saying, "Advised to remain indoors. Do not approach. Do not attempt to render aid. Repeat, do not attempt." And then static again. He turned the dial back. He found her again. She said the same thing. She said it in a loop. It was a recording. "That's coming from the county emergency band," Theo said. "Which means somebody, somewhere, at some point in the last 12 hours, decided this was worth broadcasting on a channel most people don't own a radio for." "Alden knew," my mother said quietly. "He knew, and he came to every house himself." "Why not just call?" Wren said from the doorway. She had come in without any of us hearing. Her phone was in her hand, and her hand was at her side. Her brother had not answered. "Because phones can be intercepted," Theo said. "Because he wanted to see our faces. Because he wanted to be sure we heard him. Because he was making a list." I didn't understand yet what he meant by that last one. But my mother did. I could tell by the way she looked at Boyd. And by the way, very gently, she moved the water glass in Boyd's hand a little further from the edge of the table. Alden Reyes had lived in the same white farmhouse at the end of Pettibone Road for as long as anyone in Bracken Hollow could remember. His wife had died the year I graduated high school. There were no children. The house was always well kept because the doctor was a man who believed that the outside of a thing said something about the inside, and he did not want his neighbors to think his inside had rotted just because he lived alone. We drove out there in Theo's Bronco a little after noon. My mother stayed with Boyd. Wren came with us because she said if she stayed still, she was going to start screaming. And she thought driving was better than screaming. I sat in the passenger seat with my father's rifle across my lap. I had fired it exactly twice in my life. Both times at tin cans. Both times when I was 14. Pettibone Road runs east out of town along the edge of the Kessler property. And as we drove, I noticed things I had never noticed before. Or maybe things I had never bothered to notice. The cows in the Perkins pasture were all standing at the fence facing the road, not eating, just standing. A car was pulled off onto the shoulder near the Yardley mailbox with its hazard lights blinking. And there was no one in it, and no one near it. A child's bicycle was lying on its side in the middle of the Chalmers driveway. The Chalmers had a 6-year-old daughter named Poppy. The bicycle was pink. Nobody spoke. Theo drove with both hands on the wheel and his eyes moving from mirror to mirror in a steady pattern. Wren was in the back seat, leaning forward between us, and I could feel her breath on my shoulder, quick and shallow. The doctor's driveway was a long gravel curve through a stand of birches. Theo slowed. Halfway up, he stopped the Bronco entirely. There was a person standing in the driveway ahead of us. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. The person was facing away from us, standing in the middle of the gravel, perfectly still. It was a woman in a nightgown. Her feet were bare. Her hair was long and dark, and it hung down her back in a way that suggested it had not been touched by hands in some time. "Don't honk," Theo said quietly. "I wasn't going to," I said. "Back up," Ren whispered. "Please, back up." Theo put the Bronco into reverse. He moved slowly. The gravel crunched under the tires, and at the sound the woman's head tilted, just a fraction, the way a bird's head tilts. She did not turn around. She just tilted. Theo backed us all the way down to the road and pulled off into the grass on the other side, behind a stand of pines where the Bronco was mostly hidden. He killed the engine. "That was Marion Kessler," Ren said. Her voice was very small. "That was old Kessler's daughter-in-law. She lives with them. She's a nurse." "She was a nurse," Theo said. We got out of the Bronco. Theo took a rifle of his own from the back, an older bolt-action thing he said he used for coyotes. I carried my father's. Ren carried nothing, because she said if she held a gun right now, she would drop it or shoot one of us. And I believed her. We circled around through the woods. It took us maybe 15 minutes to reach the back of the doctor's house that way. The woods were quiet. Not silent, exactly, but the wrong kind of quiet. The kind where the small sounds you expect to hear, the squirrels and the jays and the distant highway, have all decided to keep themselves to themselves. At the edge of the tree line, we crouched. The doctor's back porch was 20 yards away. The kitchen light was on. And in the kitchen window, moving slowly, we could see Alden Reyes himself, alive, unhurried, standing at his sink and washing his hands. Theo went first. He crossed the yard in a low, careful line, and I followed him and Ren followed me, and none of us made any noise that I could hear. When we reached the porch, Theo tapped once on the door frame, very softly. Not a knock, just a sound to announce us. Inside, the water at the sink kept running for a moment, and then it stopped. The door opened. Alden Reyes looked at the three of us on his porch. He looked at the rifles. He looked at my face longest, and I understood he was checking me for something, though I didn't know what. Then he stepped back and let us in without a word. And he closed the door behind us and turned the deadbolt. His kitchen was very clean. There was a pot of coffee on the stove. There was a legal pad on the kitchen table, filled top to bottom with names in his tight blue handwriting, and beside each name was a small mark, a check or a cross or a circle. "Sit down," he said. "All of you. Please." We sat. He poured coffee into 3 mugs without asking. His hands were steady. He was 64 years old and he had not slept, and his hands were steadier than mine had been all morning. "How much do you know?" he asked. "Ferris Bledsoe attacked Boyd Halloran an hour ago," Theo said. "It's already in the town." The doctor closed his eyes for a moment. His mouth moved as if he were counting. When he opened his eyes, he asked, "Was Boyd bitten?" "Scratched," I said. "Just scratched." "By a fingernail or by a tooth?" "Fingernail." He nodded once. He picked up a pen. On his legal pad, he found a name, Halloran Boyd, and beside it, he made a small mark that was not quite a check and not quite a cross. Something in between. "What is that?" Ren said. Her voice was sharp. "What are you writing?" The doctor set down the pen. He folded his hands on the table. 3 months ago, he said, the Kessler's grandson came home from a semester in Bishop's Falls. He was ill. Old Kessler asked me to come to the house. I went. I found something I did not have a name for. I have been treating it, quietly, in that house for 11 weeks. I believed I was containing it. I was wrong. "What is it?" Theo asked. "I don't know what it is," the doctor said. "I know what it does. It changes the person who has it. It happens slowly at first, over weeks, and then in the final phase, very quickly, over hours. In the final phase, they are no longer the person they were. They will hurt whoever is near them. They will hurt anyone. And you didn't tell anyone," Wren said. "I told the state health department," the doctor said. "I told the CDC field office in Albany. I told them for 11 weeks. 2 nights ago, I was informed that a decision had been made not to intervene publicly. I was informed that the situation in Bracken Hollow was one of several situations, and that resources were being allocated elsewhere, and that I was to continue managing my patients to the best of my ability." The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the coffee pot ticking on the stove. "So last night," Theo said slowly, "at 2 in the morning, you went to every house in town." "I went to every house I thought had a chance," the doctor said. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. "A chance of what?" I asked. He looked at me. His eyes were kind. That was the worst part. His eyes had always been kind. That was why my mother had trusted him, why my father had trusted him, why the whole town had trusted him for 40 years. "A chance of surviving," he said. "The people I could not save." Wren stood up so fast her chair went over. "You made a list?" "Sit down, Wren." "You made a list of who gets to live?" "Sit down, Wren, please." She didn't sit down. She stood behind her chair with her hands gripping the back of it and her knuckles white, and she was breathing the way people breathe when they are about to say something they will not be able to take back. I reached up and touched her wrist. She looked at me. Something in my face made her sit. The doctor slid the legal pad across the table toward us. Theo turned it around so we could read it. The names filled 4 pages. Beside each name was a mark. Some had checks, some had crosses. A few, like Boyd's, had that in-between mark. I looked for my mother's name and found it. Check. I found my own. Check. I found Wren's. Check. I found Theo's, written more recently in slightly different ink at the bottom of the 3rd page. Check. I looked for names of people I hadn't seen this morning. The Kesslers, all 4 of them, had crosses. Marion Kessler, whom we had seen in the driveway, had a cross. Sheriff Doone had a cross. Ferris Bledsoe had a cross beside a note in smaller writing. Symptomatic 3 days. "You knew," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "You knew Ferris was going to turn. You knew when you came to our house." "I suspected," the doctor said. "Why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you put him somewhere?" "I did put him somewhere," the doctor said. "I put him in his own bedroom 4 nights ago. And I locked the door. And I told his wife not to open it under any circumstances. His wife opened it this morning. I don't blame her. She loved him. I thought about Ferris's coveralls and the dark stain and the sound he had made in the truck. "His wife?" Wren said. The doctor's mouth tightened. He did not answer. He did not need to. Theo was still looking at the legal pad. "How did you decide?" he asked. His voice was level. He was asking the way a scientist asks. "The marks? How did you decide who got a check and who got a cross?" "Exposure," the doctor said. "Proximity, age, underlying health. Presence of children in the household. Ability to defend a structure. Willingness, historically, to follow instruction." "Willingness to follow instruction," Theo repeated. "Yes." That's why my mark is a check, even though I've only lived here 11 weeks. You called the state office, the doctor said. You reported what you saw. Most people don't. Theo sat back. He looked at me. I couldn't read his face. What about the in-between marks? I asked. What about Boyd? The doctor picked up the pen again. He turned it slowly between his fingers. The in-between mark, he said, means I have not yet decided. Wren made a small sound in her throat. June, the doctor said, and he looked at me, and for the first time his voice was not quite steady. I need you to understand something. I did not build this list to condemn anyone. I built it to know where to spend the hours I have left. There is enough of me for maybe 30 houses. There are 82 houses in this town. I made choices. I will be answering for those choices, if there is anyone left to answer to, for the rest of my life, which I do not expect to be very long. I looked down at the pad, at my mother's name with its small blue check, at the crosses beside the names of people I had known since I could walk. What do you need us to do? I said. The doctor exhaled. It was the first time since we had walked in that I had seen him look, even for a second, like a tired old man. I need you, he said, to help me finish the list. He had a plan. Of course he had a plan. Alden Reyes had spent 40 years being the man who had the plan when nobody else did. And he was not going to stop now just because the plan involved deciding, house by house, who to warn a second time and who to leave behind. The plan was this. There were, by his count, 11 houses in Bracken Hollow where he believed someone was already in the final phase of the illness, hidden by family members who could not bear to let them go. There were another 9 houses where the illness had probably arrived in the last 48 hours, but not yet reached the final phase. And there were the rest, the houses he had visited last night, the houses of people he believed had a chance. He wanted us to reach the 9. The 11, he said, are lost. If you go to those houses, you will die. Do not go to those houses. I will mark them for you on a map. And the rest? Theo asked. The rest heard me last night. Some of them will have locked their doors. Some of them will not. There is nothing more I can do for them until dark. Why dark? Wren asked. The doctor looked at her. Because in the dark, he said, the ones who have turned move differently. They are drawn to sound and light in the daytime. In the dark, they seem to conserve themselves. I don't know why. I have watched Marion Kessler for 4 nights from the window of that room upstairs. And in the dark, she stops. She stands in the yard. She does not move again until the sun comes up. If that pattern holds, we have until sundown to reach the 9 houses. After sundown, we do not open this door for anyone. And Boyd? I said. The doctor was quiet. Boyd was scratched, I said. You said it happens over weeks and then over hours. Which is Boyd? A scratch is not a bite, the doctor said. A scratch may be nothing. A scratch may be everything. I will know by morning. That's not an answer. It is the only answer I have, June. I looked at Theo. Theo was already folding the doctor's map and putting it inside his jacket. Wren was staring at her hands. All right, I said. The 9 houses. Give us the list. He gave us the list. He gave us 3 vials of something in a small padded case, a sedative, he said, that would buy a symptomatic person perhaps 6 hours of stillness if administered correctly. He gave us a hand-drawn diagram of which windows in which houses could be reached without going through a front door. He gave us the names of the people in each house who could be trusted to open a locked door for a familiar voice, and the names of the people in each house who could not. At the door, he stopped me. He put his hand on my arm. His hand was thin and light and cold. "June," he said, "your mother is a strong woman, stronger than she looks. If Boyd turns, she will know before you do. Listen to her." I always listen to her. "Listen to her tonight," he said, "the way you listened to her when you were 9 years old and did not yet know she could be wrong about anything. Tonight is not the night to remember that she is human." I didn't know what to say to that. I nodded. I stepped out onto the porch. Theo and Wren were already at the tree line. Behind me, the doctor closed his door, and I heard the deadbolt turn, and then a second lock, and then a third. As we walked back through the woods to the Bronco, the wind shifted, and I smelled the coppery smell again, closer this time, and from somewhere ahead of us in the trees, something moved that was too big to be a deer and too quiet to be a person. Theo raised his rifle. We did not lower it again for a long time. The first of the 9 houses was the Chalmers place, where the pink bicycle lay in the driveway. Theo parked at the end of the street and we walked. The doctor had told us that Ann Chalmers, the mother, could be trusted, and that her husband, Rick, could not, because Rick did not believe things he had not seen with his own eyes, and by the time he saw this thing, it would be too late for anyone. We went around to the side of the house, to the kitchen window the doctor had marked. Ann was at her sink, washing a dish very slowly, the way a person washes a dish when they are not really washing a dish. She looked up when I tapped on the glass, and her face went through a whole weather system in about 2 seconds. Fear and recognition and hope, and then fear again. She opened the window. "June," she said. "Oh, June. Oh, thank God. Rick doesn't believe me. He said the doctor was drunk. He said..." "Ann," I said, "where's Poppy?" Ann's face changed again. It went still. "She's upstairs. She's been sleeping. She has a fever." Theo went very still beside me. "How long has she had the fever?" I asked. 2 days, maybe 3. Ann's voice was small. "She was at the Kessler farm last week. She was helping feed the goats. She was fine, June. She was fine yesterday morning. I looked at Theo. Theo looked at me. Neither of us wanted to be the one to say it. "Ann," I said, "I need you to listen to me. I need you and Rick to come with us. Right now. We can bring Poppy. We have something the doctor gave us. It'll help her rest. It'll keep her calm. But we have to leave now." Ann shook her head. She was already shaking her head before I finished. "Rick won't come. He's in the garage. He said if I go anywhere, he'll..." "Then leave him," Wren said. Ann looked at Wren like she had never seen her before, though they had known each other for a decade. "I can't leave him," Ann whispered. "Ann." I put both my hands on the windowsill. "The doctor said Poppy is going to change. Do you understand me? He said in the last phase, it happens fast. If she changes in this house, and Rick is in the garage, and you're alone with her, you will not survive it. Do you understand?" She was crying without making noise. That was the worst part. She had learned, at some point in her marriage, how to cry silently, and she was doing it now while she nodded. "I'll get her," she said. "I'll get her and I'll come out the back. Just give me 5 minutes, please." We gave her 5 minutes. We stood in the side yard with our rifles low and our eyes on the house and the garage, and we counted the seconds. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the back door opened, and Ann came out with a small bundle in her arms, wrapped in a purple blanket. The bundle was not moving. Ann was still crying silently. Behind her, in the doorway, Rick Chalmers appeared. He was a big man with a red beard, and he was holding a shotgun, and his face was the color of a man who has already made a decision he cannot come back from. "Ann," he said. "Get back in the house. Rick, please. Get back in the house now." Theo raised his rifle. So did I. Rick raised his shotgun. For a second, the four of us stood in that yard, in a shape that could go 100 different ways. And I understood, with a clarity that surprised me, that I would shoot him if I had to. I had not known I could think that thought before. I thought it now, and it did not feel like a thought. It felt like a fact. Then the bundle in Anne's arms moved. It was not a child's movement. It was not a sick child stirring under a blanket. It was the same movement I had seen in Ferris Bledsoe's truck 3 hours earlier. All one motion, no wind-up. The blanket came apart. Poppy Chalmers, 6 years old, with her fine brown hair matted to her forehead and her small mouth open, twisted in her mother's arms and reached for her mother's face. Anne screamed. It was the first sound she had made. Rick moved faster than I would have thought a man his size could move. He crossed the yard in 3 long strides, and he did not fire the shotgun. He dropped it. He caught his daughter's small body under her arms, and he pulled her off his wife. And Poppy turned in his hands and caught his shoulder in her teeth. And Rick did not scream. He did not even seem to notice. He held her out at arm's length, at the full extension of his arms. And he looked at us over the top of her small thrashing head, and he said very calmly, "Take Anne. Get her out of here. Take her." Theo took Anne. He put an arm around her waist and turned her toward the Bronco. Anne did not resist. She had gone somewhere inside herself that I recognized from the days after my father died. A place a person goes when the world has asked more of them than they have. I stayed for 1 more second. I looked at Rick Chalmers, whom I had not liked, whom the doctor had said could not be trusted. He looked back at me. His shoulder was already dark with blood. "Go," he said. I went. Behind us, as we ran to the Bronco, I heard the back door of the Chalmers house close. I did not hear the shotgun. I do not know, to this day, whether Rick Chalmers used it on his daughter or on himself or on neither. I know only that when we drove past the house 20 minutes later on our way to the second address, the back door was still closed, and the pink bicycle was still lying in the driveway, and I did not slow down to look. The second of the 9 houses was the Yardleys. We reached them before the change, and they came with us willingly. And Wren drove them to my mother's house and left them there and came back for us in her own car. The third was the Perkins family. There were 7 of them, 3 generations under one roof. Old Grandma Perkins was the one the doctor had marked as symptomatic. And when we arrived, her son was already sitting with her in the parlor, holding her hand and weeping openly. And he told us to take the others, and he would stay. We took the others, 6 people. We fit them into 2 cars. The 4th was empty. The doors were open. There was blood on the porch. We did not go inside. The 5th was the McAllister farm. And Sam McAllister met us at the fence with a hunting rifle and a face that said he had been waiting all morning for someone to come and tell him what was happening. His wife had died 2 years ago. He lived alone. He climbed into the back of the Bronco without a word and became, over the next 3 hours, the second most useful person in our small convoy after Theo. By 4 in the afternoon, we had reached 7 of the 9 houses. We had brought out 14 people. We had lost, or left behind, or found already lost, an unknown number of others. The Bronco smelled like wet clothes and gun oil and fear. Ann Chalmers had not spoken since we left her yard. The 8th house was the Doone place. Sheriff Doone had a cross on the doctor's list, but his wife and his daughter did not. We were 3 miles from the Dune farm when Theo's radio, tuned to the county emergency band, cut out mid-loop, and a new voice came on. A man's voice, live, saying, "This is Alden Reyes. If anyone can hear me, please come." Theo turned the Bronco around in the middle of the road so hard the tires screamed. Ren, in the car behind us, did the same. Sam McAllister, in the back seat with a rifle across his knees, said only, "Faster." The doctor's voice kept coming through the radio. It was not panicked. It was not shouting. It was worse than that. It was the voice of a man reading a list of names and running out of time to read them. Halloran, Boyd. Whitaker, Elena. Whitaker, June. Marsh, Theo. Sundgren, Ren. McAllister, Samuel. Yardley, Peter. Yardley, Constance. Perkins. He was reading the checks. He was reading everyone he had decided could be saved. "If you can hear me, come to the farmhouse. Come to the farmhouse before dark. The 11 have come out of their houses. I don't know why. I don't know what changed. They are moving toward the center of town. They are moving toward the checks." Theo hit the wheel with the flat of his hand. "He drew them," Sam McAllister said quietly from the back seat. I turned to look at him. "What?" "He's a doctor. He knows blood. He knows what draws them. He drew them off the checks and onto himself. He's at the farmhouse alone." I understood then what the doctor had meant that morning in his kitchen, when he had said he did not expect to be answering for his choices very long. "How far?" I said. 6 minutes, Theo said. "If I don't slow down." "Don't slow down." He didn't slow down. We came up the gravel drive of the doctor's farmhouse at a speed that took the birches on both sides of us in a long, blurred green. The woman in the nightgown was gone from the driveway. In her place, spread across the yard like a slow tide, were the 11, or what had been the 11. Some of them I recognized. Old Kessler in his work coat, Marion Kessler in her nightgown, a man I thought might be the postmaster, a woman I could not look at long enough to name. They were oriented toward the farmhouse, all of them, facing it, not moving very fast, but moving. And on the porch of the farmhouse, in his gray coat, with his black bag at his feet, stood Alden Reyes. He was holding a radio in one hand and a handgun in the other. And as we came into the yard, he raised the handgun and fired once into the air. And the sound cracked across the yard, and every one of the 11 turned toward the sound and away from him and toward us. "He's giving us a window," Theo said. "Get out. Get to the porch. Go, June, go." I went. I don't remember how. I remember Sam McAllister putting his shoulder into a man I had known since I was a child and knocking him aside without firing. I remember Theo behind me, with his rifle raised. I remember the doctor's face as I reached the porch, calm, unafraid, ready. "Get inside," he said. "All of you. Now." We got inside. Theo, Sam, me. The doctor came last, and he closed the door, and he threw the 3 deadbolts, and he moved to the window and looked out at the yard, where the 11 were now pressed against his fence. "Ren?" I said. "Ren's still out there. The others—" "She turned off before the driveway," the doctor said. "I saw her. She's taking them back to your mother's. That is where you are all going, before dark. You are not staying here." "Then why did you call us?" Sam said. The doctor turned from the window. His face in the late afternoon light looked older than it had that morning by a decade. "Because Boyd Halloran," he said, "was on that list I just read. And when I read his name, your mother, June, was standing in her front yard, and Boyd was in her kitchen, and she had a knife in her hand." I don't remember getting back into the Bronco. I remember the doctor's black bag being pressed into my hands. And I remember Theo shouting something at Sam. And I remember the 11 still turned toward the sound of the shot, still not fully understanding that the sound had ended. And I remember thinking, she has a knife in her hand. She has a knife in her hand. She has a knife in her hand, like it was a prayer, or like it was the only sentence left in the world. The doctor did not come with us. He stood in his doorway and he watched us pull away, and Sam McAllister watched him in the side mirror all the way down the drive. And Sam said, very quietly, "He's not going to be there when we come back." "He might," I said. "He might," Sam agreed. He did not say it in a way that meant he believed it. The drive back to my mother's took 9 minutes, and it felt like 9 hours. The sun was low. The sky was doing the thing it does in October in that part of the country, going that pale, hard gold that means you have maybe 40 minutes of light left. I thought about Boyd's forearm and the small, shallow scratch. I thought about my mother's steady hands. I thought about the way the doctor had said, "Listen to her tonight." Wren's car was in my mother's driveway when we pulled up. So was the Yardley station wagon. So was Ann Chalmers' minivan. The house had all its lights on. That was the first wrong thing. My mother did not turn on every light in the house unless she was looking for something. The front door was locked. I had the key. My hands were shaking so badly that Sam had to take the key from me and turn it himself. Inside, the front hall smelled like coffee and something else. Something I recognized from Ferris's coveralls that morning. Wren was in the living room with the Yardleys and the Perkinses, and they were all standing, and they were all looking at the kitchen door, which was closed. "Where is she?" I said. Wren shook her head. "She wouldn't let us in there. She wouldn't let anyone in there. She said to wait for you." I crossed the hall. Theo tried to come with me. I put a hand on his chest, and he stopped. I don't know why he stopped. He was bigger than me and stronger than me, and he had a rifle. And I put my hand on his chest, and he stopped anyway. I opened the kitchen door. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table. Boyd Halloran was on the floor at her feet. His eyes were open. He was not moving. The knife was on the table in front of my mother, laid flat, and her hands were folded beside it. And she was looking at the wall across from her with the particular stillness of a person who has decided not to feel a thing yet, because feeling it now would break something they still need. "Mama," I said. She turned her head. She looked at me. "He was warm," she said. Her voice was calm. "Half an hour ago. He was warm, and then he started saying things that weren't right, and then he got up from the table and he—" She stopped. She looked down at her hands. "He came at me, June. It wasn't Boyd anymore. It wasn't Boyd." "I know," I said. "I know, Mama. I know." "The doctor was right," she said. "The doctor was right." She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mother's hands begin to shake. "June," she said, "is Alden still at the farmhouse?" I could not answer her. I did not have to. She saw the answer in my face. She closed her eyes. She said so quietly, I almost did not hear it. "Then we are on our own. We buried Boyd in the back garden before full dark because my mother said she would not have him in the house and would not have him on the lawn where the neighbors could see, if there were any neighbors left to see. Sam and Theo did the digging. I sat with my mother on the back step and held her hand, and neither of us said anything, because there was nothing left to say that could carry the weight of what the day had been. Inside the house, there were now 14 of us. The Yardleys, an older couple in their 70s. The Perkinses, minus the son who had stayed with his mother, which left 6 of them, including 2 grandchildren under 10. Sam McAllister, Theo, Wren, Ann Chalmers, who had still not spoken. My mother, me. 14 people in a house built for a family of 4. We took inventory before it got dark. The doctor's black bag, which I had brought back from the farmhouse, held the 2 remaining vials of sedative, a small stock of antibiotics, a suture kit, a stethoscope, and at the bottom, a folded piece of paper with my name on it in the doctor's tight blue handwriting. I did not open it. I could not yet. I put it in my pocket, and I would carry it for 4 days before I could bring myself to read it. Theo took the older Perkins boys, aged 9 and 11, and set them to a job that would keep their hands busy, sorting the canned goods in my mother's pantry into piles by how long they would keep. Wren took Ann Chalmers upstairs and put her to bed in my old room, and sat with her until Ann finally slept, which took 2 hours. Sam McAllister went from window to window in the house, and at each one he tested the lock, and at each one he propped a chair or a small piece of furniture in a specific way he had learned in a war a long time ago that he had not, until today, ever mentioned. My mother made soup. That was what she did. She had made soup the night my father was diagnosed, and she had made soup the day I came home with the divorce papers, and now she was making soup for 14 people out of what was in the pantry. And her hands were mostly steady again. And I understood that this was how she was going to survive this. By refusing, task by task, to let the day be more than the sum of its tasks. At full dark, Theo turned off every light in the house except the one in the kitchen, which had a heavy curtain over the window and could not be seen from the road. We sat around the kitchen table, or on the counters, or on the floor, and we ate soup in near silence, and we listened. At first, there was nothing. Just the wind. Just the ordinary sounds of a house at night. Then, around 9, we heard the first of them come down our road. It was not a large sound. It was a shuffling, uneven step on gravel. And then a pause, and then another step. It moved past the house. It did not stop. 5 minutes later, another one passed, moving in the same direction. Then 2 more, together. Then a stretch of quiet. Then a single one, moving the other way. They were going somewhere. All of them. Toward the center of town, or through the center of town, or past it. We did not know. What we knew was that the doctor had been right about one thing. In the dark, they moved slowly, and they did not seem to notice a dark house with 14 frightened people inside it, as long as the 14 frightened people did not make a sound. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinets and my mother's hand in mine, and I listened to the footsteps of everyone I had ever known walk past my mother's house in the dark. And I did not cry, because I understood for the first time that crying was a thing you did when you still believed someone was coming to help. Sometime after midnight, Theo came and sat beside me on the floor. He did not say anything for a while. He just sat there with his shoulder against mine, and I could feel him breathing, slow and even. And I understood he was doing it on purpose. He was breathing at a pace he wanted me to match, and after a few minutes, I did match it, and my chest loosened a fraction, and I realized I'd been holding my breath in a shallow way for hours. "Sam thinks we should leave in the morning," he said very quietly. "Leave where?" "He has a cousin's place 40 miles north, a hunting camp, off the grid. He thinks the town is going to be a draw for them for days, every sound, every light. He thinks staying here is going to get harder, not easier." I thought about that. I thought about my mother's soup pot and the peroxide in her drawer, and the attic where my father's rifle had been wrapped in his flannel shirt. I thought about the back garden where Boyd Halloran was buried under 3 feet of loose dirt and a wooden cross Sam had made from a piece of the porch railing. "My mother won't leave," I said. "I know. She'll say she will, and then when it comes time to walk out the door, she won't." "I know," Theo said again. We were quiet for a while. "The doctor gave me a letter," I said. "When?" "In the bag, when we left the farmhouse. I haven't read it." "You don't have to read it tonight." "I know. You don't have to read it at all, if you don't want to." I looked at him in the dim light from the kitchen. His face was very tired and very kind, and I understood something about him then. That he was one of those rare people who tell you the truth even when the truth is that you are allowed not to do a hard thing. Most people, when you say you are afraid to do something, want to tell you why you have to do it anyway. "What did you see in the woods?" I asked him. "The doe." "You said the doe was still moving." He was quiet a long time. "I saw a lot of things I didn't tell you about this morning," he said finally. "Tell me now." "I saw that they know each other," he said. "The infected. In the woods, the doe and the person she was with, they were moving together, not like a herd, like they were coordinating. I watched them for 20 minutes before I understood what I was looking at. And I only understood it because one of them stopped, and the other one stopped at the same time, and neither of them was looking at the other." "You think they're communicating?" "I don't know what they're doing. I know it's not what the doctor thought it was. He thought this was a disease. I think it's a disease that has become a thing that uses the disease." I looked at him. "Don't tell my mother that," I said. I wasn't going to. We sat in the dark. Outside, another set of footsteps passed the house. This one paused. It paused for a long time, right at the end of our driveway. I felt Theo's hand find mine on the floor between us, and I felt his fingers lace through mine, and I understood that he was not making a pass at me. He was anchoring me, the way he had breathed at me earlier, giving me something to hold on to that was warm and present and alive. The footsteps moved on. I let out a breath I had not known I was holding. "In the morning," I said, "I'll talk to her about the camp, about Sam's plan." "All right." "I don't think she'll come." "I know," Theo said, for the third time, and this time it did not sound like agreement. It sounded like grief. The morning came slow and gray. It came with a light rain, and a wind out of the north, and a silence in the town that was more complete than any silence I had ever heard in my life. No cars, no dogs, no church bell at 7, which had rung at 7 every morning of my life. Just the rain on the roof, and the small sounds of 14 people beginning, one by one, to move again in a house that had somehow held them all through the night. I read the doctor's letter in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub with the door locked. It was short. It said, "June. If you are reading this, I am not with you. I want you to know 2 things. The first is that I made choices I will not defend. I do not need you to forgive them. I only need you to understand that I made them because I could not make no choice at all. And no choice at all was also a choice, and would have cost more lives than the ones I chose to lose. The second is that your mother knew. She knew from the moment I stood on her porch. She read my face, and she understood what I'd come to say. And she did not stop me, and she did not warn anyone, because she trusted me to have counted the cost. Do not be angry with her for that. She's been carrying it since 2 a.m. yesterday. She will carry it, I think, for the rest of her life. Be gentle with her. Be gentle with yourself. You are on the list because you are one of the few people I have ever met who will do a hard thing without needing to be told twice. That is a rare thing, and the world is going to need it now. Alden. I folded the letter. I put it back in my pocket. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, and I did not recognize the woman looking back. And then I did. And then I went downstairs. My mother was in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up when I came in. She saw my face, and she knew I had read it. "He told you," she said. "He told me." She nodded once. She poured me coffee. She said, "I would do it again." "I know," I said. "That's what he said you would say." She almost smiled. It was the smallest movement of her mouth, and it was the first thing that had looked like my mother in 24 hours. Sam came in from the back with his rifle over his shoulder. He had been out in the yard at first light, walking the fence line. He set the rifle in the corner, and he looked at my mother, and he said, "Elena, we need to talk about the camp." "I know we do, Sam. You should come." "I'm not coming." "Elena." "Sam." She put down the coffee pot. "This is my house. Michael and I bought this house 41 years ago. I raised my children in this house. I buried my husband from this house. Yesterday I buried a man I've known since I was 20 in my back garden. I'm not leaving this house because a doctor I trusted came to my porch and told me to lock my doors. I locked my doors, Sam. I will keep locking them. But I'm not leaving." Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at me. He was asking a question with his face. I shook my head, very slightly. He nodded. He picked up his rifle and he went back outside. My mother watched him go. Then she turned to me. Her face was gentle. It was the gentle face she had worn the day I came home with the divorce papers. And it was the gentle face she had worn the day my father died. "You're going to go, June," she said. "You are going to go with them. And I am going to be all right here." We argued for an hour. I argued the way you argue with your mother, when you already know you have lost. When she has already made the decision and is only allowing you the shape of the disagreement. So you will be able to live with yourself later. She let me shout. She let me cry. She let me tell her all the reasons she could not stay. And she nodded at each one. And at the end she said, "I know, June. I know all of that. And I am staying." The Yardleys stayed with her. Peter Yardley was 79 and had a bad hip and would not have made 40 miles. Constance would not leave Peter. That was 3. The Perkinses decided to go because they had the children, and my mother said gently that the children were the reason to leave. Ann Chalmers, when we asked her, said only, "I don't care." So we took her. Sam mapped the route. Back roads only. 2 vehicles. We would leave at 10 in the morning, when the doctor had said the infected were most drawn to daylight and most likely to have moved back toward the center of town. We would drive slowly. We would not use horns. We would not stop for anyone we did not know. At 9:40, I packed a small bag, my father's rifle, the doctor's letter, a photograph of my father from the summer before he got sick, a photograph of me and my brother Micah, who lived in Denver, whom I had not been able to reach on any phone, whom I would not reach for another 6 weeks, though I did not know that yet. At 9:50, I stood in the front hall with my mother. She held my face in both her hands. Her palms were warm. She looked at me the way she had looked at me the first day of kindergarten, when she had left me at the classroom door and I had cried. And she had knelt down and said, "You are going to be all right, June. You are going to be all right. And I will be here when you come home. I will be here," she said now, "when you come home. Mama, I will be here, June." or I will not. Either way, you will come home someday, and this will still be our house. Do you understand me?" I nodded. I could not speak. She kissed my forehead. She turned me toward the door. She said, "Go." I went. Theo was at the wheel of the Bronco. Ren was in the passenger seat. Sam was driving the second car with the Perkinses. Ann Chalmers was in the back of the Bronco with a blanket around her shoulders and her eyes on nothing. As I climbed in, I looked back at the house. My mother was in the doorway. The Yardleys were behind her. She raised one hand. I raised mine. Theo pulled out of the driveway. He drove slowly. Sam followed. We turned onto the main road and passed the diner, which was dark. We passed the Sunoco, which was dark. We passed the church, and the church door was open, and I did not look inside. We passed the sign that read, "Bracken Hollow, population 482. And someone, at some point in the last 24 hours, had crossed out the number with a slash of black paint, and had not written a new one. We drove north. The rain kept falling. Ren, in the passenger seat, cried very quietly for the first hour and then stopped, and did not cry again for 2 days. Theo drove with both hands on the wheel and his eyes moving from mirror to mirror in a steady pattern that he would keep, without seeming to know he was keeping it. For the rest of the time, I knew him. I sat behind him with my father's rifle across my knees and my mother's kiss still warm on my forehead. And I understood that a version of me had ended in that doorway, and a new version had gotten into this car. And I did not yet know what the new version was going to be. I understood only that she was not going home. It has been 11 months. I am writing this in a notebook by the light of a kerosene lamp in a cabin 40 miles north of the town I grew up in. Theo is asleep in the next room. Ren is on watch. Sam is teaching the Perkins children to read a compass. Ann Chalmers, who did not speak for 6 weeks, now speaks a little each day, mostly about her daughter. My mother's house burned in the 2nd month. I do not know if she was in it. I have chosen, for now, to believe that she was not. Some choices you make because they are true. Some you make because they are the only ones you can carry. I keep the doctor's letter in the pocket over my heart. I have read it 40 times. Each time I understand a little more of what he was trying to tell me, and a little less of what I thought I knew about him, and about her, and about myself. He said the world was going to need people who would do a hard thing without being told twice. I am trying, Alden. Every day, I am trying to be that.